Ferguson versus Paddy. This is getting interesting with each day. It's getting more interesting. Let's start at the beginning. When Tony versus Paddy, and I'm telling you how you felt, but I'm reminding you of how you felt. When Tony versus Paddy was announced, you didn't like it. You didn't like the match. You didn't love that Tony was being rebooked. You didn't see an upside for Paddy. And when I'm telling you how you felt, I did too. I felt at least two of those three narratives, but those were the only three narratives. And then we find out that it is a feature bout. I mean, the only thing after this on this pay-per-view in terms of card placement are title fights. It's a main event if you're not counting title fights of a pay-per-view. Like, it's a big deal. That's a really big spot. And somebody's career, they all look the same. You break into the business on the undercard. Very rare you'll break into a main card, right? You break it on the undercard. Broad stroke. Work your way to a main card. Do your best to work your way to a main event, which generally does not happen, but that's the order you're working in. However long you stay there, no matter how great you are, you then start to work your way back down. And once you work your way off of TV after being on, and you work your way onto the undercard, you are now at any point one defeat from being out of the business. And if your name isn't George St. Pierre, almost everybody that's ever come in the sport and then left the sport, it sounds a lot like what I just described. Tony has came in second in his last 6, but he's still on the main card. I mean, it's very relevant. I think Tony's going to put up a good fight. If Tony puts up a really good fight and he's on the main card, historically speaking, a guy with 7 straight losses doesn't stay around. I do understand that. But historically speaking, a guy that's on a feature match of a pay-per-view, regardless of outcome, is not just out of the company as a whole. Do what you want with that thought. Because while we had that as a community, after a few days, it made a little bit more sense. And then after a few interviews by both guys, by both Tony and Paddy, all of a sudden, we're in. And I'm liking this match more and more, and I like it from a perspective that I think Tony can win that fight. I think if you look at Tony's last 6 losses, and you hear he lost 6 fights without knowing anything else, your jaw drops. But if you were to look at that, again, not knowing Tony, you just get this information. I just come and bring you information that a guy has lost 6 in a row. And he hasn't been released. He's still around. And then I inform you that guy is a feature match of an upcoming pay-per-view. I don't think you're going to be able to reconcile those. It would almost be like an oxymoron to have a guy that's 0-6 in his last 6 on a featured match of a pay-per-view. Well, why is Tony in that spot? Just out of respect? Or if you look a little closer at those 6 fights that he lost, it was Murderer's Row. It's all Tony has done is Murderer's Row. So even if he's not in a spot to have a number 1 ranking like he used to have, or to be in title fights like he used to do, even if he's not there, where is he? It's very hard to know. You could have a situation like Tony Ferguson's where you've lost 6 fights in a row, and you're the number 7 guy in the world. And I'm not demanding for you that you accept that Tony's number 7. I'm just making a suggestion to you that this is a very unusual circumstance. And if Paddy is going to beat him, how? You always run into that. Well, he's going to beat him. How? How is he going to beat him? And Tony against Bobby Green, one thing that was very clear was Tony's reaction to the strikes are greater now than they used to be. I heard a number of people say that Tony is more hittable now than he used to be. That is not what I saw. While it might be true, that's not what I saw. Tony Ferguson has always been punched in the face. Right there, square. It's boom, boom, boom. Everybody does that to him. His reaction by Bobby's punches was different, right? To go down, or to slow down, or to have that affect the fight, as opposed to just something that happens as Tony's coming at you. I agree. to that statement. But Paddy isn't the striker of, say, a Bobby Green. He's not the striker of a Charles Oliveira, I don't think. Do you? I don't see him that way, do you? And if Tony has slowed down, I mean, let's just accept that real fast. He was still a national champion in wrestling. And you have Paddy, who's never had a wrestling match. Like, do you suggest for me that Tony slowed down to the point that he's going to be out-wrestled? A national champion who stayed active and busy and stayed in shape and trained with all of these things every single day is going to be out-wrestled by a guy who's never done it. And I present it to you that way because it would almost seem like if you had this guy, and no matter what great shape he was in, we're calling Paddy the Baddy, no matter what great shape he's in, and he's training and he's doing this professional sport called MMA, versus a guy who sat on his ass for 15 years and hasn't even broken a sweat, but he was a national champion wrestler. Like, it seems as though you would still expect the national champion to have an edge over the guy who's simply never done the sport. So I'm just asking you, if you think that Paddy's going to beat him, how do you think he's going to do it? Do you think he's going to outstrike him? Because if you don't, then you believe he's going to out-wrestle him. And if I challenge you on that, do you really think that? And guys, by the way, I do know enough about MMA that it doesn't work the way I just said it worked. A guy that's never done it can out-wrestle a guy who's won a national championship. I do understand. I'm not telling you, like, that's guaranteed and that won't happen. I'm just asking, isn't Tony a much more live dog than we first gave him credit for? And there was some training footage that came out of Tony with David Goggins. A number of fighters didn't like it. RDA was public about that. Went on Twitter. RDA said, hey, Tony, stop. That's not what you need. And I went on Twitter and I asked RDA to elaborate. Why do you say that? And I had the same reaction as RDA, but I wanted to hear from the champ himself. Why do you say it? To see if it's in line with what I was thinking. I love the workout with David Goggins. I love anything that's hard. I mean, if you're working out and you're training with the goal of getting in shape and or burning some calories, getting a weight, working your mind, whatever it is that's really difficult, I would think would be really good. But when you're an older fighter, you do only have so much energy in a day that you can burn. It's not like when you were a little kid and you could go do fight. Remember when you used to have something to eat and then you want to go jump in the swimming pool and your mom would tell you, no, you got to wait 20 minutes? He's like, what are you talking about? Because as kids, you don't have to wait 20 minutes. You don't have to do anything. You can eat the hamburger while you're in the pool, for goodness sake. It's a thing when you get older. It's not a mother-father thing where your mothers and fathers always told you that. It would be true for them. So the mothers and fathers that tell their kids that didn't do sports and things like that when they were a kid, and they just assume, like, well, if I ate, it wouldn't be great if I went and did activity right now. It's very different when you're a kid. You can do 5 practices, you can do 6 practices, you get bucked off a horse, jump right back on it. Get bucked off a horse 40 years later, you're going to break your hip. So I know that Tony can only put out so much energy, and if all that energy in a day is going into exercise, I would see where it's a problem, as RDA said. But when I asked RDA to elaborate, he didn't. He laid out. And I just wish that he would, because I saw those same videos. And Joe Rogan commented on them just recently. And Joe did like it. He thought it would be very helpful for Tony. Get him in great shape and the mental exercise that's involved with that. I would definitely see it Joe's way if I also knew there was another workout in the day that was doing what they'll be doing in the cage on Saturday. That's the part that so many fighters will miss. They will spend a whole day or even a week sometimes working their butt off and getting in shape, but they will be doing things that is not what they're going to be judged on. Like there'll be no stair stepper in the octagon. There'll be no tires that need flipped in the octagon. There'll be no contest for how many squats you can do in the octagon, right? So it has to be supplemental. And when the supplemental workout begins to replace the sports workout, it's when you have a problem. And I don't have enough information to know that. I know Ferg worked his ass off, and I know he can only do so much activity in a day when he's got to just stop. No matter what I'm at or what I've gotten done, I have to stop. My body won't give any more, or I won't be able to come back tomorrow. And I don't have that information. But I do have enough information to know to seek out David Goggins and to go through some of those training. It means you've still got the eye of the tiger and you still want to win. And if you have a Tony Ferguson that still wants to win, before you dismiss him against Paddy the Baddy, it's a comeback fight for Paddy too. Nobody's discussed that. Paddy will be out over 1 year when this fight takes place. That's a comeback fight. I'm not sure that you're as sure that Tony doesn't have a way to go as you keep saying you're sure.